What would you do if you knew that underground, on which you live, there are other peoples, tribes, different civilizations, and people other than us? We don't know anything about them. Have you heard about a thing called Antarctica and the inhabitants of the underground, and what is the secret behind the Antarctic that allows great countries to build bases and conduct military trips in an area isolated from the population, and it is assumed that it is only snow, and there are no people who have lived with it for a very long time, and in reliable maps, the pole of the Earth was drawn as hollow and in its opening, and from here came the story of the underground, but all his hand was just talk on paper. But the scientists were completely ignorant because there is no proof of this his health until 1947 came in a man with strange features as if he was an Indian who appeared in France, and the problem was that your house did not have 40 different languages. In order to honor the information that he has, all this is true, and the man is not a charlatan. The strange thing is that when they ask him, they find that all the information he has is true. The man against him is considered a genius among all the people who live with him, and who has information and has knowledge. Why until now there is no crowd who knows something about her, and when they asked him, "You are the one who finished a country," the answer was very strange. "I am a resident of the underground, specifically from the region. Its name is Agres. This is in the Antarctic. I am coming here to meet a man, Dina, who is in France. Aida." The man told them that you have not heard anything about the inhabitants of the underground. You are eternal. You do not know how long they exist and live in the depths of the earth, and that in 7 openings, the upper world reaches the lower world after the meeting, and the statements of this man disappeared and he has not appeared until now in mysterious circumstances. What is the relationship between the Antarctic, which is supposed to be all snow in the city of Agrasa, which this man talked about, really? His words are true in principle. Her picture is that there is an entire structure buried under it at a depth of 1 kilometer below, and not like that, but she discovers that there are creatures moving under his frozen pane in the Antarctic in the city of Antarctica, and in his cold, he discovered that there are DNA strands present for organisms that are not known to us, definitively, meaning that there are human beings that live there. And the strangest thing is that NASA discovered 3 pyramids located on the borders of the continent. Until now, we do not know who built the pyramids and the satellite tower. It was spotted that there are slots and entrances that you do not make from nature. The entrances are very strange. The important thing is that during the Second World War, there were 54 submarines who were Germans. They disappeared in the Antarctic. They would not go back, except for the reports that appeared at the time about the behavior of the German soldiers, their behavior. It was very strange. They evacuated the war standing on the borders of Antarctica to prevent anyone from entering the continent. Why do they do this, and why are they going to war and are busy with other needs, to the extent that they were preventing whalers from going hunting in the place, the continent of Antarctica? The question here is, you are in the war or without war? What could be more important than the war itself? What is in the Antarctic? This is the same question that America asked itself during the war. They said, sure, there is something in Antarctica, and that the war is just a camouflage for what is happening from the Germans. Richard Byrd was the leader of the Antarctic expedition in 1928, and he actually took the soldiers to the South Pole. In fact, Brigadier General Richard went to Antarctica on an expedition to find out what they would face in this continent. He had some questions. What was discovered in this expedition? What was the response to them, Brigadier General Richard? No, it is an empty continent, with no inhabitants and no something, but the soldiers had their opinion to complete the search. They could come up with anything. The soldiers were not relieved by the strange trip. No one knew the behavior of Brigadier General Richard Byrd, that he saw what he did there or what he did, or why he determined that they would return at the same moment they arrived after an expedition trip. And the strangest thing is that the Brigadier Byrd, when he arrived in America, he did not communicate with anyone and did not give an explanation to anyone, and that the army leaders themselves were. Antarctica changed the planes that flew with missile carriers. The strangest thing was that the expedition took 3 weeks, but instead of taking 6 months, and after they returned, an agreement was reached between the Soviets and the Americans on an agreement, and it was impossible for them to meet together because of the Cold War. The strangers agreed on the Antarctic Treaty, and 53 countries signed it. The treaty stipulates a complete sea and air ban in Antarctica on the continent of Antarctica, and the prohibition of any flight entering Antarctica, regardless of whether the flight is civil or even commercial, and also making it a demilitarized zone. No light or heavy weapons or scientific experiments are forbidden to any country. The treaty states that this is the only place on the planet that does not exist in any human being, and it forbids any country to take mineral wealth, and the texts of the treaty are illogical for the Antarctic and made them prevent any appearance of an army or anyone going to the Antarctic. And in an interview from the television interviews of Brigadier General Richard Byrd, he said something very strange. "I did my last trip to the South Pole. He discovered something that would let us. If he finds the discovery that will make the world so small, and that if America tries to enter the war again, the security will be unstable. America must remain very well prepared because the soldiers it fights are not defeated." So they asked him, "You mean exactly what you found there?" He replied, "I found a lump of the land, but no crowd goes there. The place is very crowded, and the place is not a judge." He did not want to explain more than that. After the meeting, he did not appear again in the media. Orders were issued to prevent him from appearing and speaking to the world again, and Richard died after a period of time. He did not die with his family, but wrote his memoirs about Antarctica, and that a girl came out of the diary several years after his death and said the whole world must know the truth. The memoirs told exactly what Richard saw on the Antarctic trip. Richard says that at the beginning of the first trip, he did not see anything strange and that he saw snow and snow only once. One appeared in front of a very huge ice wall and blocks of snow almost 700 meters high or on its left as if it were a wall that has no end, so he decided to fly the plane up and reduce the load and throw the equipment off the plane in order to reduce the weight of the plane a little, and he can see what is behind the wall and he can reduce her weight. Indeed, the first thing that came up above saw a very strange thing: green plants, water that is not frozen, and mountains of greenery. So he was very surprised and decided to return quickly to the soldiers as soon as possible and inform the leaders of what was behind there. But what happened could not be expected, so he was placed under house arrest and detention and was investigated. Had it not been for his history in the army, he would have been imprisoned, but it was agreed. As for the second flight, Richard spoke about it. He said that it would start at 7 in the morning, and the purpose of the trip was for them to go to the place again and to discover what there is in humans living there, and the flight was stable until 9 o'clock and the transmission began to be cut off and strange waves appear on the plane. Then he saw the green mountains and the place that he saw for the first time on the trip, the same place, and alienation if he found live animals in the place. At 11 o'clock he saw a very large hole. He reached into the ground, so he decided to enter the hole and risk the life of the team with him to know what is inside the hole. And the hour came 11:40 and a second scientist saw, and after exactly 10 minutes, he saw something strange next to the wing of the plane, as if it was a spacecraft or something strange, and radiation was coming out, and that the radiation. As for the second flight, Richard spoke about it. He said that it would start at 7 in the morning, and the purpose of the trip was for them to go to the place again and to discover what there is in humans living there, and the flight was stable until 9 o'clock and the transmission began to be cut off. At first, it was thought that she was one of the leaders to check on the flight path, but the message was very strange, so the content of the message was: "Rest, Colonel, we are peaceful. We will bring you to the ground in just 4 minutes." In fact, the plane landed, and the plane that was next to it came down from it. Strange creatures, eyes wide, almost the size of their heads. Richard walked with them in complete surrender, and they went to a palace built of crystal. All the walls of the palace were made of crystal with an amazing luster. Destroying your plane to send a message to your people and leaders. The message was that you do not use any weapons near the Antarctic, and that this affects them in the deserts of the earth, and that the length of the war while it is at work. We are in the middle of the earth. And that we will leave you in peace so that you know that we are peaceful and that we exist, and that you do not hit any bombs near because they are limited to the hollow of the earth. And Richard says that they are very advanced in civilization. There are such underground tribes, and their description is a group that resembles humans completely, and in what is completely different. This is one of the cities located in the depths of the earth. Antarctica, and that the last thing was written in the memoirs that the king of the city, the Antarctic, told him not to rage here again, and that as soon as he reaches the leaders so that they know the truth. That is why the provisions of the treaty were implemented in 53 countries not to bear arms in the Antarctic continent, and that there are only research camps there, scientific only.